I think that sometimes, and just sometimes, you can look back over your life and see um, key moments that put you on the path to being who you are today. And then maybe you can imagine what things would be like if it had gone a different way at that particular moment. I've never been good at math. I was okay in elementary school, but once I got to junior high in algebra, forget it. Now, as an adult, I'm good at math. I don't have any problems. I kind of like having at least one thing where the answer is either right or wrong and not subject to everyone who has an opinion. Um, but it was in junior high where I got branded a disciplinary problem. And I think I spent the rest of my academic career living up to the rep of being a bad boy. And I guess I can't really complain too much because I'm pretty sure that's how I got my wife. Looking back, I think all of that came from one moment. The first quarter of seventh grade went well. They would put us all together from four different elementary schools, and we were all figuring out the pecking order. And by second quarter, I was firmly embedded with the nerds and completely out of the running for homecoming king my senior year. So the pressure was off. It was it was like we were living out the plot of the movie Grease. Um, anyway, second quarter started Intro to Algebra. Now you got to remember this was the 1970s. And I had a large number of male teachers thanks to the Vietnam War. And they were not the most nurturing people on the planet as a group. And this was back in the days of corporal punishment, which I'm sure suited most of my male teachers because frankly, it's just much easier to paddle your ass than it is to have to ask about your feelings. So, Intro to Algebra was a new class with different kids and a new seating plan. And that seating plan put me right next to Sandy O'Neill. Now, Sandy is not her real name. I have no idea what happened to Sandy O'Neill after junior high. She might very well be one of you fine people sitting out there in the dark listening to this story. And this story is going to be embarrassing enough without putting a real face on it. So I won't go into much detail about Sandy other than to tell you that Sandy was a very pretty girl and Sandy was a cheerleader. And my particular day of destiny was a game day. So all the cheerleaders were wearing their uniforms in class. So as I sat there in algebra class listening to a riveting discourse on binomial theorem, my mind may have drifted away a bit from the world of integers and formulas and rational numbers. It may have lost rational thought altogether because my mind was on the way the sunlight caught the highlights of Sandy's hair and the way she would smile her fake smile when the teacher would tell a joke, but smile her real smile when the teacher would pick on someone else to answer a question. And I thought about the heavy wool sweater she was wearing and how hot and sweaty it must be sitting there next to the heater because they turned the boiler on in October and turned it off in May. And so it get really hot in that room. And I thought about how difficult it must be doing all those cheerleading moves in a sweater that was that tight and form-fitting. And I thought about that little skirt she was wearing. It must be darn uncomfortable wearing a skirt that short outside at a football game or walking home from a baseball game or a basketball game in January. And then I caught a whiff of Sandy's perfume. Now, Sandy is the first girl I can ever remember thinking about how she smelled. And she smelled pretty good. And as I lost myself in Sandy's perfume and her short skirt and her long tan legs, I slowly became aware of my face getting hot. Now I was 12 years old at the time and going through all the usual changes that a 12-year-old boy goes through. And I was acutely aware of them at this particular moment in time. And that's when I heard my name being called. Mr. Smith! Mr. Smith, are you with us, Mr. Smith? It seems while I had been basking in the glory that was Sandy O'Neill, the teacher had written down an equation on the board and, unbeknownst to me, selected me to solve for x. Now, I didn't know much about algebra at that point, and I may or may not have been able to solve that equation, but there was one thing that I knew for sure, and that was there was no way I was going to stand up and walk to the board at that particular point in time, even if it had been physically possible for me to stand up without injuring myself. So there's only one thing for me to do, and that was to stall for time. I tried everything I could think of. I said, I didn't know the answer, and he said, try. And I said, I really have no idea. Someone else would be better at it. And he said, try. I threw my friend Mark under the bus. I said, Mark knows the answer to this. He's really good at this. Why don't you have Mark solve it? And the teacher said, go up to the board and give it a try. And I said the word every teacher loves to hear, no. And he said, what? And I said, no. And he said, I'm giving you a warning, Mr. Smith. Well, I had never received a warning before. This was terrible. My parents would be notified. I was one step away from heading down a path to a life of crime. I had to pivot. I needed to talk fast. I thought maybe if I called this whole algebra thing into question, maybe if I got the teacher to question his own life choices, I could buy myself enough time. So I launched into, why do we have to learn this stuff anyway? Who uses this other than NASA guys? We're never going to use it in real life. I don't know anybody who uses algebra. And the teacher got up, walked to his desk, and brought out the dreaded pink slip. That meant detention, or worse, a paddling. And he waved it at me and said, go to the office. Fortunately, by then, my problem had subsided. I got up, grabbed my books, went to the office. And that's how I became marked for life as a disciplinary problem and future juvenile delinquent.